Hello, everyone, and welcome back. My name is Ayush, and I am the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Talview. I'm really excited to host this session inside the fraud factory, what recruiters and leaders are saying. Interview fraud has evolved faster than most of us could have imagined. With Gen AI tools, deepfake technologies, and increasingly sophisticated identity manipulations, the hiring ecosystem is facing new risks daily. Today, we are joined with two fantastic panelists who have been on the front line of recruitment and talent operations. They have seen the patterns, the loopholes, and the rise of synthetic identities. And they'll be sharing real stories and practical insights with us. Let's quickly introduce them. We are pleased to welcome Jonathan Kestenbone as a distinguished panelist for our session. Jonathan brings extensive experience in global business development and technology led growth strategies, with a strong focus on innovation in assessments and hiring solutions. His insights into securing the talent pipeline and safeguarding the integrity of candidate evaluations will be invaluable as we explore the emerging challenges of synthetic identity, deepfake, and AI driven hiring fraud. We look forward to his contribution and perspective. Next, we have Vikas Dua. His extensive experience and background as the head of HR at Weber Shandwick India and the celebrated title of HR in my heart guy, he brings deep expertise in talent strategy, human behavior, and leveraging innovative technologies in recruitment. His insights into the evolving hiring landscape, especially in the context of AI driven assessment methods, proctoring challenges, and maintaining integrity, will be invaluable as we explore how recruiters and organizations can stay ahead of synthetic identity risk and emerging fraud tactics. Thank you, both of you, for joining us today. Really appreciate you taking time out and sharing your thoughts with us. We'll kick off the session. And I would love to maybe start off with a broader view. I know in the last 12 to 18 months, the entire industry, when it comes to interview fraud, has incredibly transformed. And I would like to kind of start off with understanding how would you describe the biggest shift you have seen in this period? And maybe we can start off, Jonathan, with you, and Vikas, we can come to you next.
Sure. Listen, first of all, thanks for having me. Really excited to be here today, have this conversation. I would say, look, the last 12 to 18 months have been unlike anything I've seen. Um, Historically, fraud was pretty unsophisticated. Maybe the wrong person would show up. You'd have recycled resumes, maybe somebody on speakerphone helping. But what's changed is both scale and essentially quality. Generative AI now gives candidates tools that allow them to create resumes that are perfect for the role, real-time ability to get insights into the answers to assessment questions, the ability to deepfake. This is really me. You can see my fingers, hopefully, right? The fingers, not my deepfake. But I think also what you've seen is a shift from individual actors to organized operators, like, almost companies focused on breaking into organizations through this loophole. So really crazy time. I think this is the problem of the next 12 months, and excited to unpack it.
Yeah, I think one of the recent news that I think around organized crime that you spoke about, Jonathan, in terms of how North Korean operatives are really kind of trying to sneak in the US market. I think that has been a hot topic that we have been hearing. Vikas, any thoughts?
Sure, Yarush. And firstly, again, thanks a lot to Talview, to you for this opportunity and to partner with Jonathan in this conversation. I think he's hit the nail on the head as he's laid out the context. But just to add a little bit of India flavor, the way I see it, just immediately post the pandemic, we had a talent boom, so to speak, where jobs were dime a dozen and talent was up for grabs and everyone had a field day. And post that, the scenarios kind of shifted. Last 12 to 18 months, it's been sort of a challenging job market, to say the least. And I think somewhere linked to that is the reason why we are seeing a lot more of interview fraud and competitiveness in this space, coupled with technologies that Jonathan alluded to, deep fake and the ability to make clones and so on. I think it's given talent a sort of, you can say, a tool or a ability to manipulate and to try and game the hiring system. And that's really what's been playing out in the last 12 to 18 months. So, desperate talent pool, looking for desperate measures to make the cut by any means possible. And that's where recruitment teams like ours are now having to struggle.
Yep. And maybe trying to narrow it down and just trying to see uh, with the organizations that you're working, seeing recruitment day in, day out. Has there been like, would you have like an example for us in terms of any kind of interview fraud that you would have encountered recently or maybe in the past that we can understand?
I can go first if you want.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Please.
Prior to generative AI, we had this crazy situation where candidates would go to this large bank and they would say that they went to Harvard or whatever fantastic school you would want to replace with Harvard. And they would make it through the interview process, and then they'd get to the background check process. And then at the background check process, they would actually say where they went to school, which could be like a community college or wherever else they actually went to school. And they would come back as having passed the background check. But that was all that would pass back to the hiring team is, that they passed the background check. But no one would verify the college that they used during the interview process and the college that they used to pass the background check. And so there's this massive gap in the process because data wasn't connected between those two systems. And you had candidates that were totally unqualified making their way through the process and getting a job at this organization. That was obviously patched once the issue was identified and addressed. And now, like, we're seeing similar stuff happen, but just at much larger scale. And as a result of both generative AI, but also remote work, where people are not having to come into an office, you're able to leverage deepfakes more meaningfully. And so, there's a few scenarios where you've had, nefarious actors get into company data that they shouldn't have had access to as a result of, faking their way through the interview process.
Yeah. And to that specific example, Jonathan, that you spoke about, while we do check in terms of whether they have passed, but we really do not check where they have passed from, or how did they go about. How were you able to really kind of go ahead and identify that? Was that kind of something that you did manually, or have you now set any process that kind of make sure that you have or now get those inputs as part of your background verification process?
No, yeah. Now we are aware of that being a gap in the process that can be exploited, and make sure to design, to solve for that at the beginning. Some of the newer challenges as a result of generative AI are harder to combat because there are point solutions throughout the process that today solve pieces of it. Whether it's a proctored interview or tracking IP addresses or, common resumes, stuff like that. But there's still a huge opportunity for solutions to come and make an impact there.
Would it be fair to say that while you have technologies in place which are pinpointed, how do you really kind of bring them together and
Absolutely.
that data kind of flows and enough data that flows between these systems for an individual like a recruiter to really make sense out of it and make sure that they are checking all the boxes.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Vikas, your thoughts?
Yeah, in fact, earlier this year we encountered a situation which I'm sure many corporates would have encountered by now, which is where we were interviewing or selecting candidates for a media a digital marketing analyst role, right? And as part of the process, we gave the candidate a real world assignment. Brief was to design a performance dashboard using common analytical tools. When the submitted solution actually came in, the team interviewing or the team assessing that solution realized that it had very high quality code, well written explanations, and we were very impressed. Then later, during one of the follow-up interview rounds, the interviewers actually realized the candidate was struggling to explain basic logic behind critical parts of the solution and the dashboard. And when asked to modify a few basic elements, wasn't able to make the changes in real time. So the team then realized that something was off, and they in fact ran that solution or assignment through AI detection software and realized that GitHub, Copilot, and ChatGPT had been used pretty extensively. So what we've realized and we've seen firsthand is the fact that candidates are using AI not just to prepare now, but also to try and uh, do the entire assessment and interview and try and just find a loophole through the system to get the offer letter in the hands. So that's something that is emerging.
Yeah, and I think worth doubling down there on is like I think there's still very much a question on whether we should allow candidates to use AI in the hiring process. Because like my perspective is, AI is like the great equalizer of knowledge labor, and they're going to have this access to these tools inside the companies when they get there. Hopefully,
True.
hopefully companies, not just the progressive ones. And as a result, like what we need to start thinking about is hiring different types of people, maybe hiring for agility and things that you'll need in this new world where we're constantly going to have to change the things that we do around AI. And I so but I think there's a balance there. It's like you have to have a policy that people stick to because you still need to assess their ability to deliver in the role that they're hired for. And I think companies are still trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
Bang on, bang on. And I think a decade ago, we might have had the same questions about do we give them access to Excel or Word for that matter, but it's part of everyone's course curriculum during their education now, isn't it? So I guess we'll have to evolve there, right? You rightly said, Jonathan, but finding that balance will be the tricky bit.
Yeah. I think quite insightful, and I think both the stories that we just heard, I think kind of have similar patterns in terms of uh, these frauds that are happening today on the ground are much more polished, uh, much more scripted, and uh, use of, I think, tools that these test takers or these candidates are now equipped with. I think I personally feel that with AI or Gen AI coming in, it's just about a layman being able to now do stuff that they were not able to do earlier or had to rely on someone else with expertise to do it. I think with the ability of so many tools now at your fingertips, just with a few prompts, you are able to either create a new app altogether that can help you do whatever you want them to do. So it's amazing. And I think while it has its own pros, it has its con as well. And we are talking about how it is being used uh, in not a very good way. I think,
I think Sam
yeah,
Altman called it the fast casual era of technology. It's like the Zara of technology that we're going into.
absolutely. Uh, Kind of now getting to the foundation here in terms of trust. Um, how is synthetic fraud impacting the trust between the candidate and the employer, and not just the employer but within the hiring team itself? Uh, how do you think this impact? What footprint it is leaving behind when you encounter any of these happening? And maybe, Vikas, we can start from you to understand what your thoughts around this.
Yeah, sure, Ayush. And being in recruitment now for many years, and I think it's a very interesting time that we've reached. Today, the trust deficit is from both sides, from the employer side for sure, but also from the candidate side. And I'll explain why that is so. From the employer side, very clearly, there is a increased skepticism now, right? A recruiter is always worried as to whether the candidate that he or she has sourced, put through the selection process, does that person have the right credentials, has been truthful and honest throughout the process, submitted the right documents, because you don't want to put all that hard work into your recruitment process to realize at the background verification stage, which typically comes at the end, that document was forged or a timeline was manipulated to kind of cover up a gap year or something of the sort. So there's always that worry in the recruiter's mind. As it is, they are so highly stretched. uh, on the other hand, candidates themselves are also kind of now wary of hiring teams and recruiters. A reason being that it's no secret, a lot of jobs today, when you see any platform, including LinkedIn, where a lot of recruiters want to uh, build their followership or build their visibility, will post what are called as typically fake jobs, attempts to create databases or just build their followership or whatever the dubious reason is. So often this kind of also comes about because candidates tend to apply to jobs but don't hear back. So that whole perception kind of gets strengthened. On top of it, you also have cases where sometimes over aggressive recruitment platforms may probably flag even genuine candidates. False positives do happen. We all know that in technology. So, on both sides, there's a sort of trust deficit that is in play. And I can only hope that whatever systems experts like you are putting together help to bridge some of this deficit going forward.
Jonathan.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, that's the biggest issue here is that trust is being eroded. And that's what we have to avoid is to make sure that, our processes stay strong and that we're able to get the right candidates through and that we don't burn relationships with candidates along the way.
I think one, I know while in the recruitment process, recruiters are held responsible for, I think the pressure is double sword now. One is definitely providing the right quality of candidates, because I've seen hiring managers always after their life that you're not giving us the right profile. And now it is also about ensuring that uh, they do not get stuck with these fake profiles coming in. Um, and it by the time they get hired, I think it is too late for us to really recognize you already spent maybe months um, on that specific candidate, and then going back and redoing all of that uh, again is about maybe a month or so. So it's a huge I think effort, time, and revenue loss for organization. I know because you've worked with organizations like Concentrix, where there were massive volumes that you hire for. um, any insights from there that you have seen in terms of best practices being used um, to ensure that it kind of is addressed at the initial stage itself?
Sure. So, Ayush, frankly, as Jonathan had said right at the top, fraud has always been a part of the recruitment system in terms of. I remember the earlier days of hiring IT BPO workers in India, where it was even on telephone calls, where assessment calls, there was a different candidate interviewing and a different candidate getting selected who would end up joining the company, right? And then it was, of course, evolved over the years with technology coming into play and recruitment platforms like yourselves strengthening the process. I think the right thing to do today is really to make the most of the latest technology facilities that are available in the market. There's no choice in that matter, really. And couple that with recruiter intuition or recruiter skill. So while the technology takes care of some of the checks and verifications, whether it be through biometrics or whether it be through IP addresses, like Jonathan said earlier, the human needs to be extra alert, needs to be extra vigilant, needs to be extra trained to be able to catch some of the nuances which may slip through. And that's where I think, as HR leaders, our job is to make sure that our teams are empowered, have the right tools, are coached on using them, are also trained on the softer nuances of interviewing, so that it's a approach that works from both ends, the human end as well as the tech end. And that's the only way to kind of overcome this situation.
Yeah, I would add to that. I mean, I think you still have live practical exercises that work. I mean, asking someone to share their screen, work through real work that they've done, think out loud, like that's really hard to fake. Obviously, multi-factor identification, asking them to verify voice and video and doing document checks. You want to kind of test them in different ways. So ask a question in three different ways because fraud generally breaks under pressure. We we find and check the behavioral analytics of a platform. Everything from IP addresses to mic patterns to are they switching windows. We have to move away from an over reliance on chat based interviews. Like those are too easy to cheat, and structured interviews with predictable answers, like we just can't get away with that. We have to be smarter.
I think what I had as my next question, Jonathan, I think you've touched on that briefly, but I think rightly mentioned that trust is fragile, and even uh, a small attempt of that kind of shakes the confidence for months. Uh, Getting on to, and I think maybe continuing to what you were talking about, Jonathan. Today, recruiters are using mix of behavioral cues, uh, technology, or manually verifying to ensure that they are able to kind of detect or prevent from fraud happening. But what, according to you, do you see working when you're trying to detect fraudulent candidates? What kind of approach do you think, in your experience, works better? And maybe since you had touched based on that, Jonathan, maybe I'll let you elaborate on that specific piece, and then Vikas will come to you.
Sure. I actually think it's a combination of tech and touch here. Like we have to train our recruiters in how to identify fraud just as much as we have to enable them with tools to help them facilitate their ability to identify that fraud. And that's the key because you can't just rely on the technology by itself. I think you have to kind of find this mix between both. And I think it's like I had mentioned, it's really about and this is where I think AI makes an impact on hiring broadly. I know we're talking about it in the context of interview security, but it's about letting humans do what they do best and computers do what it does best. And so, humans' role in the recruitment process is going to be building relationships with candidates and, uh, uh, helping sell them more meaningfully on an opportunity, and which means that they're going to have to understand more about the organization, what it's like to work there, but they're also going to have to spend more time with that candidate. And as a result, if we give them technology to be able to do that, as a result, the recruiters should be able to identify a real human from a robot, and they'll want to spend more time with the real human.
So, combination of technology that is kind of giving you insights with human intelligence coming in to be able to kind of that right balance, as you rightly mentioned, because
Ayush, quite honestly, I think if you look at it today, sitting towards the end of 2025, the only thing I can add to what Jonathan's already shared is that while we're talking and using the term technology to kind of help avoid this fraud or catch this fraud early, the thing that we really need to watch out for is that the technology is also evolving at a very, very fast clip. And therefore, even a tool which could have been said to be updated or relevant maybe early 2025 is possibly irrelevant today unless it has kept pace with what has evolved. So HR teams, recruitment teams really need to make sure that the tool that they're working with is one that is up to date, is also thinking 5 steps ahead at all times, and the team is working to make sure that as the fraudsters in the system or the ecosystem start building their skills, they are always 1 step ahead to try and nip it in the bud right at that point itself before it actually becomes a large scale issue for everyone. Along with that, I think what is extremely important is making sure that while we are relying on this tech, the process remains equally human centric in terms of making sure that interviews are very personalized. The conversations that one is having are built up subsequently on the previous statement or query of the candidate and probed so that there's real time thinking that is happening, there's real time articulation that is happening, and one is able to really be able to make out that it's a real human and not a bot at the back who's kind of trying to game the system. So that's what I would add.
Perfect. I think uh, what I could maybe pull out is that personal touch apart from just leveraging a technology. I think you rightly mentioned uh, because fraud as well is evolving, the use of AI in terms of how you can really beat the system is evolving. So has to the system on the other side as well to ensure that you are keeping up with. And I think rather than just coping up and trying to meet what is coming new, I think being 5 step ahead or ahead of what can happen, I think definitely as an organization we have been trying that. A tough spot to be in, but yeah, I think I would want to now move to more from a compliance and legal standpoint. uh, Again, with organizations that you have been with, uh, what new compliance and legal challenges are you seeing suffering because of synthetic identities or AI driven fraud happening during interviews? uh, Jonathan, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, look, I think I was hopeful that I wasn't going to have to practice law again ever in my career, and unfortunately, I'm like in this position now where my legal career and my talent acquisition technology career are meeting nicely in the middle. Um, you know, it, the legal issues around AI are like front and center, and um, I think broadly, globally, the position is like AI is not your get out of jail free card. Like this is not your yacht in the Cayman Islands that you don't have to pay taxes on. This is you have to treat this as you would a human, and we have to make sure that this doesn't have create biases in the process, and we have to make sure that it doesn't violate any laws in any country. And what you're seeing is at least both globally and then specifically in the US, you're seeing laws being created to make sure that you comply. I would argue there's no like new rules that have been created to um, make you do something more than you would have had to do if you were just following the laws, but it's more about making sure that you're making this AI follow the laws. And in the US, we have the complexity of having state laws and the federal government that complicate things. But this has created hurdles to allowing companies to adopt AI to help them assess the fraud. Candidates don't have these compliance issues to deal with when they leverage these tools to apply. We do when we adopt them, and as a result, it's slowed down organizations' ability to get access to some of these tools. And so it's a real thing. I would say that broadly the federal government's approach in the U.S. has softened a bit on the regulations with the Trump administration. I mean, he's focused more on innovation over regulation around AI until there's inevitably going to be some issue that happens as a result of someone taking advantage of the deregulation around it. But yeah.
I think you rightly mentioned, and sometimes personally, when I see from a technology standpoint, we have so much that we can do to really kind of deter or detect this early in the process. But when we really try to do something around it, is when we get into these struggles of this law not allowing us to capture this data. And then the additional complexity comes in when you kind of are global in nature. So there are regional laws, as you rightly mentioned, that works very differently. So in certain regions, you're allowed to do something, whereas in certain regions, you're not allowed to capture certain data. So it makes the problem much more complex. And it has been a struggle since day one. While on the other side, an individual who is committing fraud does not have any rules, regulations, and he is free to kind of use the AI tool in whatever way they want. But when we are trying to do something right to kind of detect that, you have all the rules and regulations that you need to follow. That has been something personally I've tried to bring it up, but again, you cannot cross that because I know that, yeah,
So my respect for people like you and your team has only gone up. Again, I understand what challenges you have to go through, because we face those whenever we want to deploy a platform, and especially in companies like ours, which are running across different countries and geographies. You hit the nail on the head. It can be quite a nightmare. Uh, Data privacy laws vary from market to market. Retention laws change, or requirement change market to market. So it's a whole different ballgame, and HR, legal, risk teams have gotten so joined at the hips now that it's a battle that they kind of have to fight every day at work, with every new twist that the fraudsters tend to throw at them. So that's how life is. Of course, the other challenge also remains now in terms of making sure that everything is guarded, protected, and retained at your end for a reasonable amount of time. Because at the end of the day, every wrong has a potential risk to the organization from a revenue standpoint, from a reputation standpoint. So that unfortunately, if that ever happens, it's hell breaks loose on the recruitment team, and it's therefore always like that time bomb that they're sitting on, which is not a very great position to be in for any professional, right? So it's something that my heart also feels for that group of people. And I just wish you know uh, fraudster of people who are behind all of these kind of reach a point where I don't know if it'll happen out of sheer will, but at least hopefully technology will be able to stop them at the gate.
yeah. And maybe my last question for today before we start wrapping up. Uh, how are you in your individual organizations kind of equipping your teams to really uh, go ahead and start identifying fraud? Like, what are those? Are there any interventions that you are planning or are already into in terms of training your team, or is there any intervention being planned that you have in place to kind of make sure that your team is equipped to handle such identity frauds happening on the ground?
Yeah, I mean, to us, training is as important as screening. Like making sure the recruiters understand what to look for. I just recently did a whole session for our entire staff on what's happening with candidate fraud. This is everyone from salespeople that are talking to companies that need to understand that this is a challenge that they're dealing with, to our recruiters understanding what to look for, and the tools that these candidates have access to. And we're constantly keeping them up to date on what those are so that they can remain vigilant and identify the behavioral cues that will help them stop this. We're also focused on creating escalation paths and helping them understand how to talk transparently to hiring managers about the things that come up in a process, to make sure that we can instill and restore trust in the process.
Along similar lines in our company, Ayush, we've also since last year taken direction, which is to equip everyone with sufficient AI knowledge and expertise for their specific roles. And HR and recruitment teams are all part of that process, where there is continuous training interventions or exchange of knowledge that keeps happening to keep everyone abreast with the latest in the space. Along with that, what we've also done is that we've kind of tried to open up and foster open communication and encourage employees as well to come forward and report any suspicious behavior. If as hiring managers they come across any question or any observation during their interviews that they're conducting, to flag them off so that we can also look at them in a real time manner and help address these. So those are some of the things that we are doing.
Perfect. Perfect. Fantastic. I think some of these actionables really kind of brings the team back in ensuring that, hey, there are interventions that can be put in place for us to really make sure that I think it's the key here is being able to identify this fraud as early as possible so that you are able to kind of save on those efforts, your time and the revenue loss as an organization. That I think before we wrap up, one maybe just a quick rapid fire round, one practical tip, something recruiters can start doing immediately uh, to reduce identity fraud. Vikas, just one.
Sure. I think the key that I would say is follow-up questions to drill down into the candidate's responses.
Yeah,
Jonathan,
I would double down on that. One real-time task that you have the candidate do to like validate authenticity.
Vikas did give a real-time scenario and then figured out in the interview stage that it wasn't the candidate who actually did it and was someone else appearing for it. So I think how do you really deliver those real-time scenario exams or exercise also I believe makes a difference. You really need to make sure that it is the candidate who has taken it. At times while you deliver it, you still struggle to make sure. I think if it is the entire work delivered by the candidate or the candidate taking resources or help from external tools to be able to deliver that. uh, thank you so much. I think incredible insights. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Vikas. Thanks a lot for taking out time and joining us. I'm sure the audience here would have loved the insights that we went through and the thoughts that we heard. Um, thank you to our audience as well for joining the session, and stay tuned for our next session. Thank you, everyone.